Welcome, dear horror listener. You're tuning into Horror Radio, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're a long-time listener or just stumbled upon this channel, thank you for joining me for another scary tale. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. We'd planned the trip as a sort of reset. Me and two old friends from college who'd all been feeling some version of burned out. Adam's job in New York was eating him alive. Jordan had just gone through a breakup, and I was dragging my feet through my last semester of grad school. We figured a few days off-grid would help us clear our heads before everything picked back up again. We booked a place in northern Arizona, about an hour outside Flagstaff, near the edge of the Coconino Forest. The listing advertised a modern cabin with rustic charm, which sounded like marketing fluff, but the photos were gorgeous. There was a wraparound porch, a fire pit, and best of all, no Wi-Fi. Total seclusion, just what we thought we needed. I'm Marcus, by the way, the kind of person who likes to overplan and overthink, so I made the drive from Phoenix, and the other two flew in the same morning. I picked them up from the airport, we grabbed supplies in town, and started the long drive out. It was beautiful at first. Dusty red canyons in the distance, tall trees lining the back roads. But as we got closer to the coordinates, the road quality dropped fast. Paved gave way to dirt, dirt gave way to gravel, and eventually we were crawling along a narrow trail that seemed less like a road and more like tire tracks worn into the woods. No signs, no mailboxes. Just the occasional animal crossing the path and the faint buzz of radio static. When we finally arrived, it was strange. The place matched the pictures, technically, but something felt off. It sat behind a high fence made of corrugated metal, with a gate that didn't open unless you texted a code to the host. The front yard had a huge dog run, empty, but still very much in use, and the air had this dry bird smell to it, like someone had been clearing brush. The host was waiting for us. His name was Dean, maybe late 40s, shaved head, mirrored sunglasses, cargo vest that looked military issue. He barely said anything when we introduced ourselves. Just nodded, handed me a metal key and said, "Leave that in the lockbox when you leave, don't forget." That was it. No welcome, no tour. Just turned and walked off toward another structure, what looked like a large steel shed about 100 feet from the cabin, behind a row of cypress trees. We assumed he lived there. Inside, the cabin looked fine. Cozy, actually. Wide pine floorboards, leather furniture, a stone fireplace. Rustic, like the photos. But you could tell it had been lived in more than the average rental. A pair of boots sat by the door. Some old takeout containers were in the outside bin. The fridge had a few bottles of beer with no labels and some unmarked Tupperware. No Wi-Fi, no cell signal, and no visible neighbors. Still, we tried to enjoy it. We played cards, made dinner, opened a bottle of whiskey, and tried to convince ourselves the host was just socially awkward. That first night, around 10 p.m., we heard the first gunshot. It was close, maybe 50 yards out, then another. We froze. "Did you hear that?" Jordan asked, already moving toward the window. Adam stood up slowly and leaned toward the front door. That wasn't fireworks, that was a sidearm. We debated whether we should call someone, but again, no signal and no idea where the nearest town even was. The closest gas station was almost 40 minutes away. So we waited. After a few minutes, we saw Dean walk across the yard, backlit by the motion light mounted above his shed. He was carrying something. A duffel bag, maybe. He didn't look in our direction, just disappeared into the woods. No explanation, no acknowledgement. The next morning, we figured we'd ask about it. When Dean showed up on the porch, unannounced, holding a propane tank, we tried to keep the tone light. "Hey," I said, "did we hear shooting last night?" He looked at me, then at the woods. "Coyotes." That's all he said. Then he replaced the tank and left. We talked about leaving, but it was just 2 nights, we'd already paid. And besides, the weather was beautiful, mid-70s, not a cloud in the sky. We figured we were being paranoid. That night, we made a fire in the pit, cooked up some sausages, and passed around the rest of the whiskey. Dean didn't show up again that day. Around midnight, Jordan suggested we roll a joint. He'd brought some from back home. Not much, just enough to chill out. We figured we'd step off the porch and light it up near the fire pit again. Nobody around for miles, right? We were halfway through the joint when Dean appeared. Not walked, appeared. He stood about 10 feet from us, just past the firelight, that almost like he'd been watching. "Smells good," he said, then stepped closer. I tried to keep things casual, just finishing up. He smiled, but not in a friendly way. "Mind if I sit?" He sat down on one of the logs around the pit and pulled a small hard black case from his jacket. Opened it. Inside was a cigar and something that looked like a silver-plated grinder, not weed, something else. He lit the cigar, didn't offer us any, just sat there for a minute. Then he asked, "You boys carrying anything else?" I paused. "No, that was it." He looked at Adam, then at Jordan. "Ever sold any back home?" Jordan said no. Adam shook his head. Dean leaned back and stared at the fire. "I used to run crews up in Taos. You know Taos?" We didn't answer. Funny how many people you meet when you're in the trade. Mostly dumbasses, but some are smart enough to walk away. It got quiet again. We didn't know what to say. Then he said, "You three don't need to worry. I like respectful people." We nodded, tried to change the subject. But every question we asked, he redirected. Every answer we gave, he seemed to weigh. Eventually, we excused ourselves, told him we were calling it a night. As we got up, he said, "You hear shots again tonight? Don't come outside. Just stay in. Don't ask questions." That was the moment the illusion dropped. We weren't at a rustic retreat. We were on someone's compound. We locked the door behind us and went straight to the back room. For the next hour, we sat in the dark, whispering, debating whether to leave, whether to try driving out before dawn. But with no signal and no idea if Dean had cameras or worse, we decided to wait it out. Around 2 a.m., we heard the shots again. 3 this time, slower. Not close, but not far either. None of us slept. The next morning, Dean was gone. His truck was missing. The shed was locked. The cabin was quiet. We packed in 10 minutes, left the key in the lockbox, and drove until we hit paved road. I don't think any of us said more than 10 words on the way back to Flagstaff. I haven't left a review, haven't reported the place. The listing was gone a week later anyway. Some days I tell myself we overreacted, that he was just eccentric, maybe a retired vet with a strange sense of humor. Other days I remember the way he looked at us, the way he said don't ask questions, and I wonder how many people did, and how many didn't get the chance to leave. Honestly, I tried to forget it. I figured maybe I overreacted or read too much into things, but I was on a call with my cousin last night. We were joking about bad hostels and weird rentals, and she brought this weekend up again. Said I told her the whole story the day after it happened, all shaky and weird, and that it still gave her the creeps. So, here we are. If nothing else, maybe this helps someone else trust their gut when a place just doesn't feel right. My name's Tori. I'd gone out to Kansas City last fall for a small music festival, one of those indie weekend lineups with cheap tickets and food trucks. It wasn't a big trip, just me in a backpack, one night. I didn't want to spend too much, so I found a place on Airbnb that was way cheaper than any hotel in the area. The reviews were limited but fine, and it was only one night. I figured, how bad could it be? I got into town in the late afternoon. My phone data was weird, like it kept dropping for no reason. So I stopped at a diner and downloaded the directions to the house while I still had Wi-Fi. The place was on the east side of the city, about 20 minutes from the venue. I took a bus most of the way and walked the last couple blocks. When I got there, I second-guessed everything. The house sat behind a cracked chain-link fence, just far enough from the next property to feel isolated. The lawn hadn't been mowed in months. The porch light flickered, and the whole front of the house had this sagging, slumped look, like it was holding itself up by memory. I stood at the gate with my backpack and hesitated. Then I reminded myself it was cheap, temporary, and maybe the inside would surprise me. I rang the bell. No answer. Rang it again. Waited. Knocked. Still nothing. I was about to check the listing again when I heard someone walking up behind me. It was this older guy, maybe in his 70s. Long gray hair, slouched posture, eyes kind of glassy. He stopped near the fence and gave me a long look. "You here for the room?" he asked. "Yeah." Are you Jim?" He nodded but didn't say anything else. Just started unlocking the gate and motioned for me to follow him. Inside, the house smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. The entryway had this beat-up couch right in front of the door, like it was blocking anyone from fully walking in. There were boxes stacked against the wall, and dusty curtains barely clung to rusted curtain rods. The furniture was draped in sheets, like the place had been prepped for fumigation, but someone forgot to follow through. I followed him up the staircase, which creaked loudly with each step. He wheezed the whole way, barely speaking. The hallway on the second floor was dim. No overhead light, just one lamp with a tilted shade. There were crosses and portraits lining the walls, the kind you find at thrift stores, some of them crooked, others just leaning against the baseboards. He showed me the bathroom. There was a hole in the drywall big enough to stick your hand through, and one of the towel racks was snapped in half. Then he opened the door to a bedroom and gestured inside. "This one's yours." The room wasn't awful, I guess. It had a bed, a shelf, a tiny desk, but it also had 3 porcelain dolls lined up on a dresser, all of them facing the bed. The bedding looked clean enough, but the air smelled stale and the ceiling had a brownish water stain the size of a pizza box. I asked if there was Wi-Fi. "Nope," he said. "Do you know what time checkout is tomorrow?" He shrugged. "Doesn't matter." That was not comforting. Then he climbed another staircase to what I assumed was the attic level. No lights. He didn't say goodnight, just disappeared up into the dark. I sat on the bed, listening to the boards creak above me, and realized my heart was going a mile a minute. The place felt off. Not just old or messy, but wrong. Like it had been empty for too long and suddenly remembered it was supposed to host someone. I went to the bathroom and noticed the weirdest part. There were no locks. Not on the bathroom door, not on the bedroom, nothing. Just bare doorknobs and chipped paint. And all over the bathroom were personal items. Half-used shampoo bottles, toothbrushes, deodorant sticks, a random lash curler on the sink. It didn't look like someone had provided these for guests. It looked like someone had walked out mid-routine and never came back. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, but the unease just kept building. There was no way I was staying the night. I pulled out a sheet of paper from my bag, folded it up, and slid it under my bedroom door so I'd know if anyone opened it while I was gone. I packed a smaller bag with just the stuff I needed for the concert, shoved my main pack into the closet, and quietly made my way downstairs. Right as I hit the middle step, I heard the front door unlocking. My stomach dropped. A man walked in. Mid-40s, button-down shirt, clean-shaven. Totally different vibe than the guy upstairs. "Hey there," he said, friendly. "I'm Jim." I froze. "Sorry, what?" "I'm Jim, your host," he repeated. "You must be Tori." I tried to keep my voice calm. "I thought the other guy." "Oh, that's just my uncle. He's not usually around. Didn't realize he was here today." We made awkward small talk for a minute, but my brain was screaming. Who answers the door for someone else's guest and then vanishes into the attic? Why hadn't the listing mentioned a second person? And why had this guy just let his uncle, someone who clearly wasn't all there, handle check-in? I thanked him, told him I was heading to the concert, and got out of there as fast as I could. The concert was amazing. I tried to focus, to stay in the moment. But I knew I wasn't going back to that house. I booked a cheap hostel near the venue around midnight. Shared room, stiff mattress, weak AC, but it had a front desk, working locks, and Wi-Fi. I passed out hard. Next morning I went back for my stuff. I don't even know why I peeked through the mail slot before going in. Probably curiosity, or dread. The old man, Jim's uncle or whatever, was passed out on the couch directly in front of the door. Head tilted back, mouth open, snoring. I froze. My heart started racing. I slid the door open as quietly as I could and tiptoed past him. The paper I'd left under the bedroom door was untouched. I grabbed my pack, stuffed everything in, and left without looking back. I don't know what that place was, or who that guy was, or why it felt so off, but I'm glad I trusted my gut. I know some people might think I'm being dramatic, but honestly, it doesn't take much for something to go horribly wrong. And if I hadn't gotten out when I did, I probably wouldn't have slept anyway. Just laid there all night, staring at a door that didn't lock, wondering if I was being too paranoid. Or not paranoid enough. I've stayed in dozens of Airbnbs. I travel often for work, marketing for a software company that hosts annual client summits in different cities. They put me up in furnished rentals to avoid the hotel markup, and it's usually fine. Sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's forgettable, but I've never had a week like the one I spent in Illinois. This was last March, just outside of Peoria, in a small lakeside town called Banner. It wasn't anything special. One diner, a bait shop, a post office, a few quiet streets with older homes tucked between trees. The house I stayed at sat right at the edge of the lake, a modern remodel with big windows and a long gravel driveway. Looked peaceful in the photos. Almost too peaceful. My name's Andy, by the way. I'm 34. I'm not the kind of person who gets spooked easily, but I also know when something feels off. And from the second I arrived, it felt like someone had cleared the place of all life just 10 minutes before I got there. There was no check-in, no key under a mat or lockbox with a code. The front door was wide open like it had been waiting for me. Inside, everything was spotless. Too spotless. The couch was staged like a catalog photo. The coffee pot was still warm but bone dry, and there were 2 half-melted ice cubes in the sink. I stood there for a second. No bags unpacked, no jacket off, just listening. Nothing. I called the host, but it rang twice and went to voicemail. I left a quick message, just a polite heads up that the place wasn't locked when I arrived and someone might have forgotten to finish cleaning. Then I went back outside and opened the trunk. That was mistake number 1. The week was supposed to be a working retreat. I had deadlines piling up and a pile of revisions for my manager that I'd been putting off. This was my chance to breathe, reset, and just knock things out without distractions. But from the first night, I couldn't focus. There were noises, not loud ones, not banging or footsteps or anything cinematic, just tiny things. A hum I couldn't place, a shift in air pressure, a creak from the vents that didn't match the layout. Every night I double-checked the locks, and every morning at least one door was cracked open an inch. I started keeping a notepad to track which ones I closed. Bedroom, kitchen, back patio. I marked them with a tiny X, and still found them unlatched hours later. By night 3, I stopped sleeping through. I'd doze off at 1, wake up around 3 and lie still in bed until 5. Not from fear, just unease. My body wasn't wired right, and I kept dreaming that someone was walking down the gravel driveway, hands in their coat pockets, stopping halfway, then turning around. In the morning, I'd open the blinds and look for footprints. Never saw any. But the driveway always looked different, like something heavy had turned on the spot, like the gravel had been rearranged. On Thursday, I tried calling the host again. No answer. His profile said his name was Darren. I scrolled through the listing again and found something strange. Under house roles, it listed 3 items in bold. It said, "Do not use the fireplace. Leave the front door unlocked at all times. Do not rearrange the furniture." That was it. No explanation, no context, just 3 oddly specific roles. I had already broken the second one on day 1. The front door was the first thing I locked when I got inside. It felt like a formality, something you do out of habit, not defiance. I didn't think it would matter. But now, I couldn't help wondering why he put it there. What was the deal with the fireplace, or the furniture? I hadn't touched either. The fireplace was old brick, probably sealed off years ago. And the furniture? Well, I remembered moving a dining chair on the first night so I could plug in my laptop near the wall. I moved it back that afternoon. That night was the worst. It started just after 2 a.m. I was half asleep when I heard something shift in the hallway outside my room. Not footsteps, more like a dragging sound, like carpet resisting the slow slide of something heavy. I sat up and listened. It stopped. The house went quiet again. I laid back down, then it started again. Same rhythm. Slow, steady, too smooth for footsteps. I couldn't see anything from where I was, so I got up and tiptoed to the door. When I opened it, the hallway looked the same ugly floral runner, same dim wall sconce near the bathroom. But one thing was off. The coat rack at the end of the hallway. It was on the other side when I went to bed. I was sure of it. I walked down to check. It looked the same. Same shape, same hooks, same chipped edge on the base, but it was in a different place. I turned back and saw the sconce light flicker once. When I looked again, the coat rack was gone. I don't know how else to say this, but the hallway felt deeper, like I was being pulled into it inch by inch. The door to my room was just 10 feet away, but it felt like 20. I walked backwards toward it. I closed the door and locked it. Then I waited until morning. I called Darren again Friday morning. Voicemail. I messaged Airbnb support and said the place felt unsafe. They told me they'd escalate it and follow up. I packed my stuff and got ready to leave early, but the car wouldn't start. Battery was fine. Lights came on. But when I turned the key, the engine just clicked. I tried 3 more times. Nothing. I started walking back to the house to charge my phone and call for a ride when I noticed someone standing on the porch. It wasn't Darren. It was a woman, maybe mid-30s, black jacket, short hair, hands in her pockets. She didn't wave or speak, just stood there. I stopped about 30 feet away. "You need something?" I called out. She tilted her head. "You're staying in the right house," she said. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm leaving," I told her. "Just waiting for a ride." She nodded slowly. Then she said something I didn't understand. "Don't let it trick you again." Before I could ask what she meant, she turned and walked away. Not toward the street, toward the woods behind the house. There was no path. Friday night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Something about the house felt wrong. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was disorientation. My phone kept resetting to the wrong time. I'd check the stove clock and it wouldn't match the microwave. I'd open a window and find a different view than before, like the lake had shifted 15 feet to the left. At one point I walked into the bathroom and found my suitcase inside the tub. I hadn't touched it since packing. I decided to wait outside until sunrise. The couch was too much. The bedroom was worse. So I sat on the front steps with a blanket and watched the sky change color, minute by minute. At exactly 6:41 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Darren. The message read, "Do not talk to her. She always comes on the last night." I looked around. The street was empty. The woods were quiet. But I didn't go back inside. I left the second the tow truck arrived. Didn't wait for the driver to help. I just handed him the keys and got in the passenger seat. We rode in silence for about 15 minutes before he asked what happened to my hand. I looked down. There were 4 dark splinters buried in my palm. I must have grabbed the door frame too hard. I didn't even feel it. I didn't leave a review. I just reported the listing and moved on. Airbnb sent me a generic apology and refunded half the booking fee. I spent the rest of the month in a chain hotel in Springfield. The windows didn't open, the lights flickered, and the walls were yellow from age. I slept like a rock. I haven't stayed in an Airbnb since. I'm not saying it was haunted. I'm not saying it was some elaborate prank or time loop or dimension shift or whatever Reddit would call it. But I will say this, if the roles on a listing feel more like warnings than instructions, don't test them. Just close the tab and book a hotel.